I thought we could just do a quick project together to actually test all these skills that we've acquired in the last couple of videos. And so maybe a good example could be this page that Nico and I have been working on. So this is a revamped examples page, and we've made these kind of beautiful cards for each example. We're trying to make them more clickable, more visual, more consistent in their layout, just a bunch of improvements really. And so why don't we try to recreate this part, all the cards, together using the skills that we now have. So let me take a screenshot of these cards for reference for ourselves, but we'll actually remove the layers. So now we only have this stuff, but we don't have any elements for these cards. So I'm going to put that screenshot over here and say that this is our reference. Let's make this design happen. Alrighty. So let's think a little bit about how we could approach this. It seems that all of these are the same components. So we probably want to use Figma components to create a repeatable, reusable component that we can use for all these cards. That will just be a huge time saver. And then we want different images for each of the cards, but that's fine. We can do that through component overrides in the instances. And we can also change the text in the instances. And we have some tags here, and they are kind of laid out in a centered way. And so that might be a good candidate for auto layout, because we can actually change the text on each card here in the instances. And so if we use auto layout, if we change the text and it flows slightly different, auto layout will take care of the layout and make sure it still looks good. So that's why auto layout is so perfect for this use case. So why don't we get started and create a card? So I'm gonna create a new frame to be these cards. And actually first, I'm gonna just do some math to try to figure out what should the size of this component be. And so we have a layout grid enabled, a 12-column layout grid. So I'm just gonna go up to the menu, quick actions, layout grid, and show that layout grid. And so I can see it here. And if I were a smart person, I could probably just look at the grid and calculate what the total width is. Actually, let's do that. It has 12 columns. Each is 80 pixels wide. And then we have 11 gutters in between, and those are each 20. So the total of this should be 1,180 pixels. Let's see if we can sort of visually confirm that. 1,180. Okay, so that's our total width. And then we want 4 columns. So we're going to reduce that to be 4 columns. And so we have 80, 80, 80, 80 plus 20, 20, 20. And again, we can do this math and say like it's 4 columns times 80 times 3 gutters, which they're 20 pixels wide, which means 380 total. And we did this visually just like using the grid, and we can confirm that this is 380. So that's nice. This is a good size for our frame, our component with the cards. And then we just want to find a height. And if we look visually at our reference here, it seems maybe 4:3 could be a good ratio here. So what I like to do is just, I know that this is 380, so let's just compute what the height should be using that ratio. So we can do 4:3, and it should be roughly 506.66666. And of course, that's a sort of hideous value, so let's just call that 500 and get on with our day. So this is a pretty good dimension for our card. Now I drew this as a rectangle, but I actually want a frame. So I'm going to remember these values, 380 times 500, and go over here and just create a frame with that size. And I did this too quickly for you to even notice, but I pressed F on my keyboard to choose the frame tool, and then I just clicked here, and I got a new frame. And we said that it was going to be 380 wide and 500 tall. So this is our card component. And let's actually call it there, card. And now we can turn it into a component instantly, because that's quite rewarding to instantly see our new component being used. So I right click and choose create component, and now we have the card component. And if you go to assets here, you're going to see it here, and you can actually drag it into the artboard here, or onto the frame. I also like to do option drag from the component itself to create instances, because I just find that to be quicker. All right, so we want these cards to live like this. Oh, actually, I did the math wrong. This is going to create a 3-column layout. So let's quickly fix that. Goodness. So let's drag this across 3 columns instead. Alrighty, so we have 3 times 80 plus 2 gutters, 2 times 20, so 280 in total. And 280 is the width. We want a nice aspect ratio, so times 3, 373. So let's call that 380 for the sake of beauty. I like those rounded numbers. So we actually want these cards to be 280 times 380. So I'm going to change this card component that we set up to be, did we say 280? Yeah, 280, 380. All right, 280, 380. And you see all the instances instantly updated to match this, which was really nice. Okay, so we have a few instances in here, and we have the main component over here. So this is going to be our card, so I can put a little text in there just to make that clearer. So the first thing we can do is actually lay these out, and I'll select them, and I see auto layout here, so I'm just going to press auto layout, and auto layout instantly creates a layout container for these and lays them out in a way that it thinks I want to lay them out. And it's a pretty bad guess, but how would it ever know? So what we can do is just remove this entire auto layout container like this. We drag it out to fill the entire page, and then we go in here and tweak the values. So we want it to be 20 pixel spacing in between each, and we want the vertical spacing to be 20 as well. And that looks much better. And it should put one item here, but it doesn't. And so I can go into the auto layout containers properties here and look at the values, and it seems like this should be 1180, but it's 1179. So if we add one more pixel, that should fit onto that line, and it does. And I also want to make sure, I mean, I put it visually in the center, but I want to make sure I'm actually right. So I'm going to press this button to horizontally center it according to the coordinate system. And I think it jumped 1 pixel there. So I was probably right in adjusting that. Okay. So the next thing we want to do, perhaps just to do something rewarding, is go to the component here and tweak the border radius, because these cards have beautiful rounded corners here, and we want this component to have that as well. So let's pick a nice number, maybe 24 is divisible by 4, it's a clean number. That could be quite nice. And so now these cards automatically update to have that color, or that radius, not color. Speaking of color, let's not have these white cards. Let's instead pick that color from the reference screenshot here. So I go into fill, I press color, I get this color picker that I can just click here and pick up that color. And using Control G, I'm going to toggle the grid on and off to just like visually confirm that this starts to look good. Because the grids are lovely, but they kind of get in the way of my design. So I want to remove them. If you don't remember Control G, you can just go up here and search for grid. And you can show layout grids, toggle that on and off. All right, so things are coming along nicely. Next, why don't we add that title to each card? So I'm going to press T to select the text tool, and then I'm going to click in here and say detect and track objects. All right. And you'll see that it's left aligned and it's sort of running off the screen here. That's fine. But what we can do is we start by setting it to centered up here. So we center it horizontally, and that's nice. The problem with that is when we add more text to it, it's going to keep running to the right. So what we want to do is we want to choose the text alignment inside that container to also be centered. That way the element itself is centered, and any new text that comes in will also be centered. So now when we add more text, it's going to grow in both directions, which is at least a much better problem to have. And we can even set the width here to be fixed. And so we say like, hey, you should never run off over the edges like that. And so what I like to do is I like to click the container here. It's 280 pixels. Let's say that we want 10 pixels margin to the side here. And so 280 minus 10 to remove the padding would be 260. So you can click this and say you should be 260. And then we click center again. And now we have a decent margin to the sides there. All right, that's pretty good. We also want to fix the typeface here, so I'm just going to go here and choose plus Jakarta, which is the one we're using. Let's use a little bolder font there, like that. We can reduce the line height a little bit, although most of these will be on a single line. And now we have our text there. That's pretty neat. And you can see it updated to all the instances. So we can actually go in here and start to modify these and call this ARKit scenes. And we can call this something else. Well, MRI scan, etc., etc. So you can start to make overrides already in the instances of the card component. Next, maybe let's add an image. And you can just take one from your desktop and drop it in here. And it's going to come off really huge because Figma tends to insert these at their native size. So you might have to zoom out to see the entire dimensions of that image. So I'm just going to go ahead and scale that down much, much smaller. And let's look at the reference. The image is roughly taking up perhaps 3/5 of the height. So we can just do that visually, change the dimensions here to match, maybe down here-ish. And I look at this value as it changes when I'm dragging and trying to find like, what's a nice pixel value? And so 240 would be quite nice. So let's do that. 240 is the height of that image. And then I move down the text to adjust it accordingly. Super. One thing I can mention is that on this component, on this frame, which is a component, we have set clip content. So if you put anything inside here that overflows the container, like this image actually goes up to this corner, but it's getting clipped now because we've said in this component that, hey, clip anything that overflows. So this is a pretty good option to be aware of, just like if you want the things inside to be clipped or not. Alrighty, so we have an image and we have that title. And if we look at the cards, they all have images as well now, which is quite nice. And if we wanted to, we could go to Unsplash and start to just get a few different images here. This one, this one looks nice, and this one looks nice. And okay, I'm losing myself in my Figma files. Here we are. So now we can go into the instances, not the component itself, but the instance. Click our way to that image. And now we can go into the fill, and we can choose another image. So let's grab one of those that we just downloaded and use that as a background instead. So now it's being used as an override inside that instance. And we can do that here as well. We go in, take a more beautiful image. And on the third one, let's go in here as well. Pick this one. And so these are still connected to the main component, but we're making some overrides to the text and to the image. And so if we were to now change the background color of the card, that would propagate to all the instances because we haven't made any overrides to the background. But if we were to change the text here, to just say some exclamation points, some of these guys will get that because we haven't made any overrides to these, but these have been overridden, and so they are no longer on that upgrade path. They won't be getting the changes to that thing. And the same thing is true if we were to change this image to something else, maybe reducing the brightness. These guys will get it because they haven't made any overrides, but these guys have made overrides, so they're not going to get that update. And to get back on that upgrade path, you would have to reset all the changes. So you click that and say reset all changes, and now you would be back on mirroring that main component. So that's a quick word on just like how these overrides work. But this is quite nice. I like where this is tracking. It's already looking quite good, but we're missing the tags. So let's go ahead and add the tags. And we're going to use auto layout for this, and it might get a little bit hairy, but just bear with me, and you will be able to recreate this quite soon when you've played around a little bit with auto layout. So in this design, we have a few tags. They are grouped together, they have equal spacing, and inside each tag we have a little bit of padding here on the sides, on the top, etc. And they all seem to be centered. So if the content changes, they should still remain centered. And so auto layout is perfect for this. So let's start by creating a single tag. And so I'm going to press T to select the text tool, and I'm going to write a tag name. So let's say pinhole camera. And let's reduce the font size a little bit, and maybe font weight. We probably want that to be even smaller. And the line height should also be a little bit less, something like that. Okay, so what we could do is we could create some copies of this and just wrap this in auto layout. That's not bad. We can create all kinds of interesting behaviors here where they wrap, etc. But what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to wrap each tag in an auto layout component, because auto layout is quite nice in that it gives us side padding here. So I have a single thing in my auto layout container, but auto layout allows me to add padding to the side and padding to the top and bottom. And so what's neat about that is if we add a background to the tag, we can pick that background color from here. Now auto layout is responsible for adding that padding to the sides and to the top and bottom. And the nice thing is if we change the size here is great. Auto layout expands to wrap that content, and the padding remains consistent. So I don't have to manually sort of adapt a frame to the text. It just automatically happens. So let's reduce the brightness of that text a little bit. And let's reduce the padding using that auto layout frame that wraps the text. And so let's reduce the padding on the sides and the padding on the top and the bottom. And actually, here's a little detail for you. Because the way text works, it's a little bottom heavy, optically speaking. So one trick that I like to use is I go to this auto layout component and I say, I don't want the same padding on the top and bottom. I actually want a little bit more padding on the bottom, because visually speaking, there's a lot of white space here in typefaces with the lowercase letters. So it already looks as if it has a lot of spacing up here and here. So by adding an extra pixel to the bottom, it just visually looks a little bit more centered. So that's a little trick that I use all the time, essentially. So now we have a tag here, and we can add a little bit of radius to it to make it look good. And already we're quite close to our reference implementation. Now what we could do is we could copy this, and now we could wrap these three things in auto layout. And that's pretty good. We're getting really close. But the annoying thing is, if I were to change the background a little bit, these guys would get out of sync. So we actually wanted to turn each individual tag into a component. So let's move this out here as its own frame, living in the void out here. And we right-click it and say Create Component, and we call that Tag. And now we can option drag a few of these in, or you can drag them here from the Assets panel as well. Drag them in, maybe we want 5 of these guys. And now we can select them and choose to create an auto layout thing. I'm not seeing the auto layout button there, but I'm just going to use the keyboard shortcut. So I don't know why sometimes Figma can just be mysterious in that way. I'm not sure why I didn't see the create auto layout thing here, but I use the shortcut Shift A to create that auto layout. And it's probably available in the menu as well. Yeah, add auto layout. So if this should be buggy and weird and not show you something, the Figma menu typically has your back. And so let's add auto layout from there. And so it added this container. It messed up the spacing a little bit, I would say. And you can see that here as well, like the spacing between each item is -54, which is kind of a cool feature that you can do negative spacing. It can be nice for some types of effects, but we definitely want some spacing. So let's increase this value to 2 pixels. And we also want that on that axis. And if we look here, these tags are centered horizontally. So we want that as well. So we click this and say, hey, center these guys. And the entire container needs to be centered as well inside this frame. So I'm going to press this button right here to center those guys. And now we can just maybe change up the copy here a little bit so it looks a little bit more real. 2D, 3D. And you can see auto layout is working all its magic when we're changing this. Depth, and this looks a little too even for my taste, so I'm just going to make something up. Lorem, perfect. And when we type text in here, you can see 2 different auto layout rectangles working their magic simultaneously. So each tag is wrapped in a single auto layout thing, which adds the padding to the sides and like moves the padding as the text container scales. And then each of those tags live in this auto layout container, which centers them nicely and adds the spacing in between. So it's very common to wrap auto layout items inside auto layout items. And because we made each tag into an instance of the tag component, we can now go up here and make upstream changes to like, hey, this color might look better, which it absolutely do not look better. So let's go back to gray here. And yeah, this is starting to look good. I would actually move this down a little bit. Kind of want some even spacing between these things, and maybe we make the image a little bit larger here. 256 is actually not a bad number. It sounds computer sciencey, but I'm going to choose 260. And I messed up this value, so let's just tweak this. 280 times 260. That looks good. I like those numbers. And then a little bit of adjustment like that. And now we can go to the grid, and it's starting to look really good. And so we can just choose one of these instances and copy paste a few more times. We can add a few more images from Unsplash here just to make it look a little bit more random and nice. So this guy, let's go in here and mess things up. I find that with design in general, like you have to have a little faith that it's going to look good. Very often it doesn't look good until you've done this stuff like adding some random images, adding some random copy, making it look a little bit more realistic. So yeah, having a little bit of faith is good when you're designing. And nice, we've actually done the impossible. We've taken this design and we've re-implemented it from the ground up using auto layout, using components and instances, and using fills and background colors and typefaces and all the rest. So hopefully this feels like a good sign that you're starting to figure Figma out. And hopefully this didn't feel like magic to you. If it did, send me a DM and I can explain any step to you.